My dear friends, we are in the 32nd Sunday of the Ordinary Time. And this Sunday is special also because today the Church remembers the anniversary of the dedication of St. John's Lateran, the Basilica in Rome. There is often this question that is made by our young people and also by our faithful. Should we really go to the church? Because God is present everywhere. I can be in my room and pray. Or I can just look at the TV and attend the Holy Mass. Is it really important to go to the church? A very important question. Because very often we find that the church is an extravaganza. Or maybe it is a time-killing thing. We really don't have to go there. But let me tell you the testimony of this young Muslim woman who, after attending the church, she says, God, you are truly dwelling in your house. She could feel the presence of Jesus. She could feel the presence of God in the church. She literally experienced that presence of God in the church, and she never refrained from going to that church. Well, what is the thing that changed? Now, what is the thing that is really present in this church? It is the presence of God, because when something is consecrated and dedicated for worship, we must really believe that God really dwells there. That is the concept we have in the Jewish tradition. The temple is dedicated, is consecrated, and is set apart for the service of God, for the glory of God. So God really dwells in the temple with His people. We have this concept of the tent of God's presence, where God was moving along with His people in the tent. And later, a temple was built in Shiloh. And when that temple was destroyed, a new temple was built in Jerusalem. That temple was destroyed, and later another temple was built by Zerubbabel somewhere around 500 BC. That temple was destroyed. Another temple was built, and the third temple was destroyed by the Romans, and a temple is yet to be built in Jerusalem. My dear brothers and sisters, what I'm trying to point out here is God had always wanted His temple to be built. We've seen that picture in the Old Testament when God literally gives directions how the temple is to be built. The temple is something that invokes and reminds us of God's living presence and God living with His people here on earth. It is a testament and a memorial of that living presence of God, the physical reminder. So therefore, the temple is important. Our churches are important. Why? So, because in it dwells our God. In the Jerusalem temple, what made it significant was the Ark of God's presence. The Ark of the Covenant was placed in the temple in the Holy of Holies. So that made the temple important, and that was the testament of God's presence in the temple. And in the New Testament, when we come, we have Jesus Christ in the Blessed Sacrament. And the presence of Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament in our churches is the reminder of God's presence with His people. Therefore, church is really important. And in this way, that there is the living presence of God in our churches. My dear brothers and sisters, we need to be reminded of this. We need to realize how important this church is. But gradually, Jesus is also reminding us that this temple is also His body. This temple is literally His body, and therefore it has become a life-giving sacrament for all of us. And thereby, St. Paul, taking this idea, would later say that we are all the living temples of God. Why? Because the same Spirit that was in Jesus is present in each one of us. Therefore, we have become that holy and living temples of God here on this earth now, because God's Spirit dwells within us. And now we need to keep this holy and sacred. We need to consecrate it and set it apart for God's service. At the same time, it has to be completely dedicated for God. That is, nothing else other than a godly service is to be permissible in this temple. So we need to maintain this decorum. It is difficult. But no matter what, we need to keep that. This is literally what St. Paul is asking us. Therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, a reminder is set out to all of us that we are supposed to keep the physical structure of church holy. And when Jesus declared that his body is that temple, St. Paul later adapted that to telling us that each one of us are the living temples of God, the living testaments of God's presence, because God lives in the core of our being. But in the gospel of today, we see a challenge. The challenge is the temple that is supposed to be kept holy has now become a marketplace, has now become a place where goods are sold. And Jesus is literally attacking that. When you look at the picture, the things that was really happening in the temple were becoming a corrupt manifestation of something that was meant to really help the people. Because we have to understand that the first temple that was built under the supervision of King Solomon later was destroyed, and the people were also, deported to different parts of the world with the exile that came with the destruction of the temple and the defeat of the Israelites. People are scattered. Again, the second temple destroyed. People are scattered. So, with this scattering of the people, and when the Jews came together for the celebration of the Passover, it was difficult for them to carry animals and birds to offer them as sacrifices at the temple. So naturally, at the temple, they needed people who could change coins, because the temple had a different set of coins. And the animals they had to provide. So all these facilities were arranged for the people in the temple. But ultimately, these things that were arranged in the temple in order to ease and make things easy for the people now are becoming burdensome for the people, because everything started to be done with profit motives. So Jesus is literally attacking that. How can you malign God's temple? How can you make God's temple into a business endeavor? My dear brothers and sisters, we need to remember that our churches should not be business centers. And we also need to remember that our body should not be used for things that are not holy. The moment we realize that, we are upholding the very purpose of what Jesus Christ stood for. Let us remember, my dear brothers and sisters, that everything that we do, that every step that we take in order to uphold the sanctity of something that has been given to us in its pristine beauty is to be maintained. And we are to be the messengers of that divine grace. We are to be the bearers of that divine grace in the lives of people. So let's hold these things with utmost sanctity, not to malign them, but to uphold them, and to make sure that it carries the message of God's grace and God's peace into the world. And that is the literal message we see in the first reading of today. That water that flows from under the temple and ends up, wherever it goes, it brings fullness of life and plenty of fruit, even in the Dead Sea. So this is a literal picture that Ezekiel provides. And my dear friends, all of us who participate in this divine liturgy or participate in the service in the church and move to our lives are not going empty-handed, but we are going with the fullness of life that God is providing us. So let this day of the dedication of St. John's Lateran be a reminder that God always continues to bless us. And whenever we participate in the temple service with its fullness, we are actually becoming harbingers of God's grace, not only in our lives, but also in the lives of everyone, wherever we go. This is the beauty of God's grace. May God continue to bless us, and may God keep us in His divine grace. Amen.